Hello, I'm Dr. Ron England coming to you from Daytona State College, and this is CEN3722, Human-Computer Interaction. And today what we're going to talk about is finishing up our discussion on user interaction, and specifically today we're going to talk about mobile systems interaction. So what we'd really like to learn from this is the different techniques that we can use when designing systems for mobile phones or tablets or smaller devices that are mobile, and how we're going to design the best systems for those platforms. Because what those platforms bring is some new capabilities, but also some new challenges. So let's first look at the capabilities that we're adding to our stable of things that we can do when we're designing for these types of systems. You still got the possibility of using a keyboard, you still got the possibility of using a mouse, but now we're going to add this ability to actually have a touch screen interface. Now realize that the touch screen interface is also an interface that's available in a lot of laptops and also now on a lot of desktop systems. So that ability to actually interact through the method of touch is going to bring about a whole rich set of things that we can do. But also realize that when you're designing for desktop systems, you may not actually have, you may have touch, you may not. Okay, but when you're designing for mobile devices, you can really design for that touch interface. The other thing that it actually brings to you is the concept of voice interaction, which again, many systems that are legacy systems can also have that ability to have voice interaction added onto them. Now, in a lesser extent, you've also got many of the mobile devices can be handheld, which means that just the movement of the devices can be a user interface. And there's some really interesting user interfaces that are designed based on that ability to move the device around. But let's first look at the concept of touch. The touch screen brings a lot, but it also takes away a little bit. A mouse is a very precise instrument. Okay, it goes to a specific spot. It's really down to the level of a pixel or a few pixels on a screen. But a finger is a very blunt instrument when you're using touch, so it's not going to be able to get to that very fine precision. Okay, so you're always going to have that situation that you have to deal with your buttons are too small, I can't hit the correct button, my thumbs are too fat, I can't hit the right thing on the keyboard, on the touchscreen keyboard, and you've got to design for those capabilities. Now, a lot of that design for those capabilities is things like auto spell correct, because the designers realize that if you're using a keyboard on something as small as a phone, you're going to have a hard time typing in the right type of thing. So they autocorrect, which brings about all sorts of humorous things that can occur. Okay, but another big thing about the fingers is that you've got 5 on each hand. So in a situation where you've got a mouse and you've only got one pointer, now we've got lots of pointers. We can have a lot of things going on the screen. And we have an entire event set to actually deal with the fact that you've got multi-pointers. So what we're going to do next is we're going to actually look at the gut level. This is getting down to the Android API. And these are the actual events that are being captured. And we're really not going to delve into the deep part of how to program in the Android API, because what this is it's a raw set of things that can happen that allow you to then abstract that to a higher level. We'll look at that higher level in just a second. But the concept of if a finger touches the screen, that triggers an event. If a second finger touches the screen, it triggers a second event. And if a third finger touches the screen, it triggers a third event. And these are the actions that actually occur. And when, of course, when you take your finger off or you move your finger across the screen, those all trigger events. So by taking that basic level set of things that you can do in the actual computer design of the computer behind the scenes, you now have all these incredible types of gestures that you can abstract up to what they are. So in other words, a tap. I tap and I'm done. Okay, that's just a brief touch and withdrawal. Or a double tap, tap, tap. Okay, that is a separate event than a tap. And those low-level events allow us to actually identify these types of things. So now we've got a whole bunch of them. We've got tap, double tap, drag, flick, pinch, spread, press, press tap. You've got drags with multi-fingers. You've got drag with rotate. You've got rotation with multiple fingers, rotation with a single finger, rotation with 2 fingers, multi-finger types of taps, squeezes, which are different than pinches because a squeeze is multi-finger and a pinch is 2 fingers, and trace. That's a lot of stuff. But these are all natural occurring types of events that people are very used to. So what that means With all these different types of gestures that you can work with, you've got the ability to design a very rich interface, but also you have to avoid designing a very confusing interface. Like, to make this happen, you need to do a double tap, circle, and then a triple rotation of the fingers with a squeeze. Yeah, not sure how many users are going to get that, but as long as you keep it natural and follow the design principles, you should be fine. Also realizing that the mobile devices still have support for the keyboard and the mouse. And it's really interesting because I've actually seen people using a phone with a keyboard and a mouse. You put the phone in a little keyboard, put your phone in a little keyboard cradle, and then and start tapping away with its little mouse right there. Hey, remember, people get comfortable with a certain way of doing things and are not necessarily comfortable with moving to a different way of doing things. But for the most part, most people using a phone are going to be using their hands and their fingers to interact with it. Voice. Voice has been around. Great rules for how to do voice interactions, but with the mobile phones, because they always have a microphone on them, and the tablets, because they always have a microphone on them, you've got this ability to actually do really rich voice interaction and voice interfaces. So what we're going to look at is the actual primary interaction roles of dealing with voice: dictation, command, agent, and identification. So let's look at actually what those are. Dictation, I would love it if it worked better. Some dictation engines work pretty well, but essentially what you're doing is you're replacing the keyboard input for just dictating text with recognizing the voice. The trick to that is if you're doing voice interaction, most voice interaction engines won't let you talk fast, and they also like you to have a space between words, which is not a natural way of talking. However, it allows the voice interaction engine to actually do that. So having done dictation on voice interaction systems, I've actually had to learn to speak in that very unnatural manner. Works well for very short messages. Call home. Okay, I would like you to get some milk. Simple stuff. Command interface. This is an interface. Now remember, before we were just dictating text. The text would be whatever it is. The command interface is actually to issue real commands on the system. Play music. Okay, that's a command. It's not dictating play music. It's actually going to do it. And a lot of the different types of voice interaction systems that are going to be doing command interfaces need to have a trigger. So for example, if you're using your phone and you hit the little microphone button, okay, that is now saying that I'm going to go into a read mode where I'm actually going to read from I'm going to get from your voice. It goes into that voice interaction mode. Okay, that triggers it to go either to be able to do the voice. So for example, at home where I've got an Xbox, one of the things that you can do with an Xbox is its voice interaction, but to trigger it, you have to say Xbox, and then it wakes up. Of course, many times, if you just in conversation say Xbox, it will wake the Xbox command engine up, and then something that somebody says, like, I want to play something outside, well, next thing you know, the Xbox is playing outside. Not actually literally, but playing something that would be the equivalent of an Xbox doing it. Okay, so these are very common and relatively straightforward design principles for that, but you really want to follow the guidelines in the case of doing voice interaction of the actual device itself. The agents are fun. Everybody, I think, is now familiar with the concept of agents. Siri is one of the most common agents. Essentially allows you to interact with the device, but it actually is smart enough to be able to do commands. It's smart enough to do dictation, but essentially it is the interface into the device. And most of the agent systems attempt to use natural English language. So you can go to your iPhone and say, Siri, what is the temperature outside? And Siri will try to figure out what the temperature outside is and tell you what it is. And that is an agent-based. It has an AI engine behind it. The AI engine may be located on the phone itself, but more often the AI engine is located in the cloud. But remember, a phone interface is typically a portal to the cloud in the first place. And the last type of voice interaction that you would be dealing with, which is the identification, the biometric engine, where it literally has the ability to recognize you. The voice interaction engines for recognizing people are Still a little bit clunky at best, but they're obviously getting better. But biometric identification systems definitely play a huge role in user interface design, and voice is one of those. So, in designing for mobile systems, first thing is all the basic rules that we've been following all along still apply. Know thy users, know the task, build from the ground up. Understand that 80% of the users will only do 20% of the functions. Those are the basic guidelines that we have. But remember, now we're throwing in some new ways of doing user interaction, of getting input into the screen. But now the downside. You've got all this capability in an itty-bitty box, tiny little screen. So there are guidelines for how to do interface design for each of the individual devices, including iOS and Android, which are the two operating systems which are typically run on small devices, and they have specific guidelines of how to deal with that problem of what we call real estate. So just an example in dealing with the real estate issue. Before, when you're designing for a large screen, you can have these nice, rich, complex menus. Well, now you've got a hamburger. That's, by the way, what the hamburger, what the little menu, the 3 lines is called the hamburger. And it is relatively universally known that if you click on that, it does bring up the entire menu, but it's a totally different way of doing a menu interaction than what you might be used to with a mouse and a PC screen. So, what have we looked at here in the mobile design? It's a new world. You have new ways of doing input, but you've also got the limitations of how you're going to do output. So, all the basic design guidelines that we've always been following all along still apply. All the general rules. But now there's just some different nuances of how you can do it. It's a nice new world. It's a rich new world that you get to work in when you're doing mobile design. Enjoy it, okay? And guess what? New designs, new types of abilities for different kinds of interfaces are going to pop up. We may be thinking that the phone is the end, okay? The mobile phone is the end of where we're actually going to go with technology. That is not true by a long shot. So the real moral of this story is be ready for those new types of interfaces that you can now design. Good capabilities that you can get out of these things, and some incredibly awesome opportunities for interface designers here. So, signing out from Daytona State College, this was Mobile Design, okay, interaction with mobile designs. Dr. Ron England, thank you.